smarter way. Connect to real world by learning and learn the smarter way. Treat real world as your teacher, and you can learn a lot from this real world. Okay, we come back here now. Let's analyze what we did. We took a real world problem, and you can see the diagram over there on the top, right? We had a problem where somebody is going to climb the steps, the ground floor to top floor, right? So okay, this was the diagram, the original diagram, right? We started with, we saw also a video, a two-way switch, and how the gentleman was able to connect and do the wiring for a two-way switch. This is your ground floor switch. This is your top floor switch. And what are we doing here? We are connecting a bulb so that when you make ground floor switch on, the bulb glows. You can climb up the steps. As soon as you reach here, this is your top floor switch. When you on this, the bulb becomes off. You can go inside the room, sleep, right? This is the real world. Now we go to the analysis part. We also analyzed this problem. We had drawn out the objects connected to this problem. So this is the bulb for which we wrote a class here. Then this is the ground floor switch. And this is a wiring which we express in terms of beans.xml. So let's see the behavior. We also recollect the behavior of a bulb. Bulb becomes on or off. That's why it has a status. It makes use of a switch to connect to power. So it has a method to, set the ground floor switch. That means when you call this, you should be able to, make the ground floor switch on or off. Now you're setting the ground floor switch here. This is your switch. The behavior of switch is very simple. A ground floor switch has a method to make on. It has a status. Let's come back now to the configuration. Here we have all the components which is needed for the wiring. We have a bulb. To make the bulb on, we have a ground floor switch. We have the power. We also told that just merely bringing the components in the table will not make the bulb on, right? We have to complete the circuit to make the bulb on. So that means bulb has to talk to switch in our world so that, or it should refer the ground floor switch so that it gets connection from the power. So that is where we call this ref local ground floor switch. Property name is ground floor switch. Observe this very carefully now. This is where we start injection. Bulb is dependent on ground floor switch. We are injecting the dependency here, the ground floor switch. But how are we injecting this dependency? We are telling that as a property, right? In terms of wiring here, remember this. You're telling this ground force switch is a member of the bulb, but it's a separate bean, right? So we have made a bean configuration here, ground force switch. And when we do this kind of configuration property name, how the spring is going to relate the ground floor switch to the bulb. Spring, what it expresses when you express a dependency like this, it will expect a method, a setter method, set ground floor switch, to make the ground floor switch live in the bulb object. So this is the class where you put the set ground floor switch. And as I told you, right, the ground floor switch is going to have a status as well as method. Let's come back to our beans.xml. We have done a partial wiring here. We have not done the complete wiring. All we have done is that you connected the bulb to ground floor switch. Ground floor switch is connected to power. If we operate the switch, then the bulb should become on. Now let's go back. Let's do a diagram. What kind of diagram are we interested? Let's go to paint. What I will have is probably a button, two buttons, 1, 2. This is your ground floor switch, right? And this is your top floor switch. So this is something we needed, right? So what we are going to do is we will have something like this. Localhost :8080 and then bulb details. Yes. So we have a ground floor switch. And I think I'm just planning for the screen, right? As soon as you make this ground floor switch on, the bulb should become true, right? Let's go back. So I will have a bulb.jsp. JSP in reality is what? It finally gets converted in HTML. So if you write HTML, so that's fine. Or if you start with a JSP, that is also fine. Now, what I am planning here is observe this now. What we have is a JSP wherein we have a form, and then we have the title of the page. Then we have these buttons. I'll explain about $status later, but for now, we need these basic things, right? We need a switch, and then we need the status of the bulb. Then what happens is we do some action on the ground floor switch, the bulb should become on. That is our objective. So for that, what we have done is that we have defined a button ground floor switch. And then we are having a hidden button, just like, a actor is there on the screen, but somebody behind is singing, right, for him. So that's a hidden scenario. This actor is just, making actions, but their voice is coming from somewhere else. Similarly, when I click on the ground floor switch, I'm going to send a status like ground floor switch is set, which is true. And I'm going to submit this form. So as soon as I click on the ground floor switch, it goes to a JavaScript. It is going to make this hidden value ground floor switch 1 as true, and the form is going to submit. So this is about the JSP. Now we need, in the Spring world, we need a MVC, right? Model view controller. So I think let's discuss about this model view controller. So this is your Spring, right? Model view controller. Now we are going from real world into our software world. And in a real world, a human being literally touches a button and makes it on. He doesn't talk to button, but in this case, we have to talk to a controller. The controller knows only HTTP requests. So this is your HTTP request, which is coming in. And the front controller listens to your HTTP request, but how do you make sure you make it to the particular request? Through the URL, right? That is, you assign a particular URL and the controller starts listening to that. And then what happens is that as soon as the request comes, the controller transfers this control to a method. So in our REST world, we have different methods: get, put, post, delete, a lot of different things. So what we are going to do is we are going to do a request mapping, and we are going to call the default get method. We're going to assign a URL. That means that if somebody is going to call a bulb details like this, a GSP will appear here, right? This is the basic thing. So I need to have a method wherein it listens to a particular URL, and then as soon as it listens to this URL, the controller should call a GSP. So in the front controller, it decides whether I should call a view resolver or I should call a data model. This is your master controller. Let's talk about it later. This is your front controller. So what we need here is a model. Why do we need a model here? Because we have the status of the buttons which we need to get inside our controller. So far so good. We have a controller, we have request map, we have a model. And then what happens is that the front controller decides whether to call to a view resolver or a model. That means I need to have a view resolver here in the Spring MVC part. But I do have, there are ways to set the view resolver. You can have an internal view resolver, and I have set an internal view resolver here. So what happens is when you have a HTTP request, let's go to the controller first. Let's see the controller logic. So in this controller, I get this bean through the application context. Generally, the application context is in SpringBoot application, but I have got it here because I wanted the bulb to connect directly to my JSP page. So you have a request mapping of bulb details. You see just return bulb. Now, if the request comes to this URI like bulb details, How does the view resolver know that it has to call a JSP? Now what I tell about view resolver will make sense to you. In this SpringBoot, I have set an internal view resolver. What it will do is as soon as it receives the value bulb, it will call bulb.jsp. How does it call bulb.jsp? In the application.properties, I am saying that my Spring MVC view prefix is webins/JSP. That means you drop any JSP in this folder. If it matches with the return value bulb, then it will call bulb.jsp. So that is what I have done. We have webinf JSP under web app. We need web app directory because this is a enterprise application, right? We need a web app. We should follow the war file format directory structure. So under web app, we have webinf, and then we have JSP. And under JSP, we have this bulb.jsp. So far so good, right? We have a method which is calling bulb.jsp. Now the next task is, as soon as I hit the ground floor switch, what I have done in bulb.jsp is there will be an action as soon as you hit the button. And the method is post. Action is bulb status. It has the form as an ID, bulb form. So when you click this, I'm transferring hidden value, which is true, right? And as soon as you click button 1, it will come here. It will make this ground floor switch value true. It will submit. So when it submits, it comes inside this controller. I've written a post mapping method. It is listening to this URL /bulb status. And then it gets the status, which has been put in a model. What model we are talking about? Suddenly you bought a model. No, I'm not. This is the model we are talking about. So this model is which has been talked here at this point. And then I'm pointing, I am also telling, I'm not just saying to what URL this has to listen. I'm also specifying to what parameters I should listen. Request parameter, the ground floor switch. But where are we setting this request parameter ground floor switch? We are setting that here in bulb.jsp as a hidden value. And what happens is, as soon as this parameter comes, it is being mapped to status, right? And then we have another object, HTTP servlet request. As soon as you click the button, the status of that button, what it is carrying, has been put in model.add attribute. And then we are going to have a ground floor switch ready. We are going to set the status as true. Why should we set this as true? Because we are saying that the ground floor switch is on. And so if I press this button, the ground floor switch should become on, the bulb should become on. Then next what we are going to do is, this is all troubleshooting statements. I'm just making sure that, am I getting all the elements? And then as soon as I get the status, I am going to the bulb object, the bulb Java object, and I'm setting the ground floor switch. And then what happens? The bulb status is set up with the help of ground floor switch status, which I'm setting it here. So if the ground floor switch is on, the status will be true, and then bulb status also will become true. Otherwise, it becomes false. So far, so good. What I am going to revisit again what I told. We're going to have a JSP where we have a ground floor switch. As soon as I press on the ground floor switch, the bulb should become on. So far good, ready, right? Let's do this. Then we saw our controller. Then we have the SpringBoot class, right? Where we have this annotation SpringBoot application. This annotation simply, does a auto configuration, and then it does a configuration. So what is the equivalent of SpringBoot application? So the Spring Boot annotation is not just one annotation. It does several things. It has add configuration, right? That is why I am able to put values in application.properties. Add component scan, right? It is able to scan these components or bins. And that is why we have put the value here. So the value what has been put here are three values: configuration, component scan, enable auto configuration, right? Now we discussed about Spring Boot application. We are going to start the Spring Boot application. Let's run this. Okay, so we'll resolve this issue first. Interesting. Could not find. That means I need to compile this. Okay, build is success. Let's run this. Is there any error here? So far, so good. Let's see. Okay, beautiful. Congratulations, guys. You built a GSP page now that is reflecting the status of the bulb. I'm going to click the ground floor switch. Here you go. The bulb has become on. So in my next episode, I'm going to talk more about how to have the top floor switch. As soon as I click on the top floor switch, I'm going to make the bulb false. After doing this whole exercises, we'll do some more exercises. But what I can guarantee now is that if you follow these 4 episodes of mine, then you're going to understand clearly what is a dependency injection. And this 4 episodes will guarantee you that the dependency injection concept of Spring will get printed in your brain. I'm just repeating what I am saying. I will guarantee that if you see 4 of my episodes, which I talked just now, the concept of dependency injection will get printed in your brain. What that means, if you see these videos carefully, and if you have a computer at your home and internet, you will download the Spring framework. The Spring Boot framework all by yourself. You will do the coding of JSP and do all this by yourself. You will not get stuck up anywhere. You have to believe me. If you like this video, cue the comments below, and that will motivate me to build the next episode. For now, bye. Thank you.